Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here. We have a popular session on a very, very important topic. We've been hearing all of this week at this year's annual meeting about artificial intelligence. It's kind of been the hot topic. What we haven't really addressed yet is how artificial intelligence stands to accelerate other critical technologies. And one of those critical technologies is biology. There have been some spectacular advances in technology in the past few years that are unlocking unprecedented volumes of data and tons of opportunity, and it's giving us a powerful new set of tools, not just to read DNA through genome sequencing, and not just to edit DNA using CRISPR, but in fact to write DNA. So we have write access to life, which is why this is such an important panel, because this is going to change everything. So today we're going to give you insights into how artificial intelligence and biotechnology are enabling businesses to create products and services that are not just made, but grown and ultimately adapted and evolved with consumers. And we're going to talk through strategic scenarios for the future to help us understand how, as artificial intelligence and biotechnology start to converge, how it's going to reshape business, reshape consumers, and really help us evolve. But as great as all of this sounds, there may be a little bit of downside. So we will talk also about risk, how the convergence of AI and biology need to be pursued with responsibility to make sure that we get on the right side of this. We're going to get specific whenever possible and get deep with real-world examples and case studies on what this future may look like. And by the end of this conversation, I can assure you that you will leave here with fresh perspectives and new ideas. So with all of that in mind, I'd like to introduce our panelists. To my left is Dror, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Israel Innovation Authority. We have John Schultz, who is the Chief Operating Officer and EVP at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. We've got Chris Abbott, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Pivot Bio. He'll tell you all about that in a moment. Dr. Sarah Reisinger, who is Chief Science and Research Officer of DSM-Firmenich. And last, we have Dr. Noubar Afeyan, who is the founder and CEO of Flagship Pioneering. I told everybody just before we started that if I hadn't been moderating this panel, this is the panel that I wanted to come to at the forum this year. So I'm excited for this conversation. So Sarah, I just wanted to start with you. We have a lot of people in the room and who are tuning in, who are interested in artificial intelligence. Well, everybody's, right? AI is the new hotness. So everybody's excited about AI. People are curious about biology. I would love for you to just level set us. So what are we talking about? What is the state of play? Sort of where are we right now?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. I also would have attended this panel. I think it's a really exciting topic because when I think about it, AI, and actually more generally data science, is revolutionizing how we do biology, both the how, but also what we can deliver. And so to me, this is an incredibly exciting area. What is it? It means that we have tools. We have genome sequencing. We can do proteomics and metabolomics, which means what we can do exactly.
Bunch of words.
So what we can do is we can understand what your DNA is saying, but also what is the cell doing? So what is the cells in your body, the cells in a plant, all these things, we can understand that. And all of that data helps us then to better deliver products to you, to better understand nutrition, health, and all sorts of things that can help consumers and the world.
Okay, so I think when we talk about when people talk about AI, AI is an umbrella term that means a whole bunch of different things, right?
Yes.
And it's kind of similar with biology. You have some really interesting thoughts on the microbiome and how do these new sets of tools help us break down the body into different parts, and what are you starting to see?
Yeah, so the microbiome, again, it is this really complex community that lives in and on us, right? And so there's not just one microbiome. You have one in your guts, you actually have one in your lungs, and you have on your skin. And even different parts of your skin are going to be different. And so if we can understand those complex communities and how you can modulate it, this is incredibly important. So your gut health and how you're feeling, how your stomach's feeling, not only impacts how you're feeling physically and your physical health, but also your mental health. So we're looking at how can we modulate that using different tools and understanding those networks of communication between those bacteria and how it influences your body. So that's an area at DSM-Firmenich, we're even doing that in the skin and understanding the modulation of your microbiome to help make your skin healthier and how that influences skin health.
Okay. So I don't know if my microbiome knows how much I love the flavor vanilla, but I do know that vanilla is because climate change is like increasingly challenging to cultivate and grow. I'm curious to know, so DSM-Firmenich is doing a lot of work researching the futures, smell, taste profiles, things like that, right? So is part of what you're doing thinking about scarcity? And
yes, so a lot of our things, what you can do is scarcity, and we have products which you can make via biology. It's so that you can replace or augment natural products, especially with climate change making them more difficult to produce. The other thing that you can use with AI is increase your solution space. So if you love the taste and aroma of vanilla, can we have something that's reminiscent of that is new to the world, and using AI to increase that solution space that a human alone would not be able to do? So that's something we're definitely leveraging, using receptor biology data and millions of data points there, using our understanding of taste and smell to identify what can be new that can help consumers to have sustainable solutions that are also really desirable, right?
Okay, so that sounds like a business I would want to have right now. Like, let's get that going. On the other hand, it sounds like, Noubar, maybe...
I'm on it, Amy.
You're on it. Good. You're on it. But here's what I want to know. What I want to know is, it feels like it would be challenging, because a lot of this stuff is new and people don't like change. How hard is it to get new businesses, Noubar, like this off the ground? I mean, you've had 70 at-bats on this, right? You've got 70 different businesses that you've been involved with at this point. But can you just walk us through a little bit more what the challenges might be?
Well, this space is all about science and what science enables. And when we talk about science, we think about textbooks, if you're not working in science. And we kind of feel like we figured most of this out. In physics, that's probably partially true. Chemistry, it's partially true. Mm-hmm. In biology, it's in an infinitesimal way true.
Why? Can I ask why?
Yeah, because what we call mechanism is the little part of what's happening that we have some certainty around, and then we describe it like we understand the whole thing.
Okay.
And so, in fact, we don't understand much of what's going on in anything, in my view. And I've been doing this for 36 years. Now, along the way, what we think we understand, we're very confident about, and everything else can really bite us. So, with AI and the role in biology, just to put a finer point to that, we have now a tool, which we also don't understand, as you said in the beginning, but which does not try to understand things by reducing them into simple words, as humans do. So the notion that you can present a lot of data and train models, which we may not as humans understand how they're doing what they're doing, to re-represent what is being observed and even start predicting things that may fit into that same paradigm, is an unprecedented ability for us. We used to call this models. Mm-hmm. Models in biology have always been driven by data. All models are. But in this case, the models are far more sophisticated than what we can actually describe in a paper. And that's been regulating what you're allowed to do in science, which is you got to ultimately come up with some explanation and put it out. So I actually think that AI, which I kind of call the other AI, is a tool for augmented imagination. And our imagination in science will actually take flight. Because in the past, we were only able to imagine what was right in front of our nose. And so, because you cannot actually take big leaps in science because you have no way of verifying whether what you're saying is or is not true. With AI, we'll be able to take bigger leaps, many more of them. The experiments needed to actually reduce to practice will tell us which ones are valuable or not. And then your question, how do you actually create economic value out of it? It still remains a big issue, but I'd say very few of the businesses that we're involved with ultimately are going after things that are temporal, meaning you might do it and then somebody else comes along the day after with a better app or a better solution. Here, these are like either disease cures, vaccines, or in agriculture, products that take a while to get there, but when they do, actually can be protected, at least in our experience. So I'd say we spend less of our time working on things that we're not very clear have huge value propositions, and two, trying to figure out how we're going to defend ourselves, because it's so hard that most other people don't even try. Mm-hmm. And so if we get there, we at least have the hubris that we will figure out how to commercialize. Now, we may be wrong, and oftentimes companies fail because we're wrong, but I'm not sure what we could do in day one to actually predict what the market looks like 5 years from now.
Right.
And those are the timelines that we undertake. In drugs, it's even 10 years. In ag, it's like 5 years. So it's a bit of a different space.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like, and I hate to call folks out at the annual meeting this year, but I've seen a lot of companies that suddenly they weren't doing so great, but they put .ai on the end, and suddenly everybody's very excited. Nobody's putting .bio, right, on the on the end of their companies. And I bring this up because last month, a pretty well-known company in this space that had wonderful research just couldn't seem to commercialize in a way that was sustainable, and that's Amyris. And I know that's not one of your companies, but I just wonder, again, is that a cautionary tale as we're thinking about moving biology into a consumer technology product in some way? Is that something that, you know, 'cause it gets talked about a lot?
Look, I think you cannot be in biology and not understand evolution. You cannot be in evolution and not think that species that fail in any given circumstance are a cautionary tale for the species that survive. Because at the end of the day, so much of what happens in these companies is circumstantial. So Amyris was one of the big success stories for a very long time. But that does not guarantee survival in an evolutionary sense. And so at the end of the day, if you're dependent on innovation and you ultimately kind of find clever ways of getting money, trying new things, partnerships, they were great at partnerships. I haven't followed the company for many years, but 10 years ago, we were quite active in that space of using synthetic biology to create interesting new chemicals, even fuels. Our experience in that same space, and that's where Amyris started, was that in the fuel space, where already 10 years ago, we could make renewable liquid fuels from biology, whether it was starting from biomass or even in our case in CO2. But it turns out that in a commodity market, at the end of the day, you can make as green a thing as you want, and DSM can let us know because we've had lots of dealings with them in the past. But at the end of the day, they don't think they can sell it for much more. And so if you have to create a totally different supply chain infrastructure to make a biological product and then have it succumb to commodity prices or a little premium, as an innovator, you go someplace where they'll pay you a premium for that innovation. So I would say in this space, unfortunately, the outside of therapeutic applications of these types of new tools have been limited not by the science, in my judgment, not by the execution necessarily, but by the fact that the market wants them to be competing with commodities that have been around for 100 years with all the costs of infrastructure absorbed. And I think that is something that at least we learned, and we titrated a bit away, went more into agriculture where we think we can get some premiums, but that's a tough space. And look, I mean, this whole field for us is all about uncertainty. And at the end of the day, if people are not willing to embrace uncertainty, they should work on apps.
But and isn't that a moment in time thing too? Because with some of this technology, hopefully it's price deflationary in a way that a fixed asset business or a traditional synthetic business can't be that nimble. And so at some point, that product has to stand on its own 2 feet, to your point in the value prop. But hopefully the cost model can actually be reduced in a way that some of the synthetic incumbents couldn't.
Right, and I think the question is, can you finance yourself long enough to do that?
Agreed.
And Amyris was actually a poster child of a company that could, and of course, there's no guarantee, is my point.
Yeah.
So I keep telling people, in our space, at least others I'm not sure about, that you want to thrive, but it turns out that thriving and surviving are opposite sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
So even if you think you're thriving, you have to keep watching survival, because unlike companies that just kind of make money and grow on profits, and then they go, you know what, I'm away from that dying condition. In our space, you just keep putting the money back into growing, and at some point, you might flip around and lose your survival, even though you are thriving. And that's an opportunity for large companies who, if I were them in this space, would just let R&D play out, let the failures fail, and the success ones, which is what happens in biotech, basically make their way to large companies. And the more of that happens in the industrial biotech space, the more the industry will actually thrive, in my view.
Chris, I'm wondering if you asked that question because you are tangential to a commodity space. So we both grew up in the Midwest, Minnesota, Minneapolis.
Go St. Paul.
Chicago. In our region of the world, farming is incredibly important. So you want to talk a little bit about Pivot Bio. I tell people about you all the time. You guys have done something kind of insane, but why don't you describe your approach to nitrogen, and then I'm going to get back to the question that you asked him, because you're going to face potentially
on the cost component. So thank you. What we do very simplistically is we develop biologics. In our case, these are microbes or little bacteria that more and more are delivered as a seed coating. So for those that aren't farmers, generally you treat seed with chemicals and other things to protect that seed from fungal pressure or disease or something. We do it now with nitrogen. So instead of applying synthetic nitrogen, you can apply less of it, and then this bacteria.
So wait, synthetic nitrogen, is that code for fertilizer? Or what is
yes,
that
exactly. So traditional fertilizer sources, which half of us would be dead if they didn't exist. So
why is that? Because they're just too hard to...
You would not achieve the output and yield that we have today without synthetic fertilizer.
Okay.
So it serves a very critical role in feeding the world and where we've come to today.
I'm going to keep doing that. Where does it all come? Where's the synthetic fertilizer coming from, usually?
Let me come back to that.
Okay.
So our microbes have an ability to convert nitrogen out of the air to essentially ammonia, a form usable by the plant that creates nitrogen fertilizer, just like synthetic. Now, why does that matter? Why even compete in a commodity market? Well, synthetic nitrogen is derived from natural gas in a process developed by the Haber-Bosch technology over 100 years ago. It's a powerful thing because it's an energy-intense form to produce nitrogen fertilizer. But when it gets applied to a field, it's volatile, so it can turn into nitrous oxide, which is a bad greenhouse gas, 300 times worse than CO2, but it can also leach and run through the waterway. So growing up in the Midwest, and even to today, people are talking about, should we be using less fertilizer because of the dead zones, because of the water quality issues? And that's a sensitive topic because growers use the tools at their disposal. They've been given synthetic nitrogen, and thank God, because they feed the world with it. We're slowly trying to shift that to bring in more novel sources that are weatherproof, that do have a higher propensity to perform. And in our case, leveraging technology so that we actually can produce a product and sell it at an attractive margin, even through a full cycle at the bottom points of those cycle, which is where we are today. And if you were 24 months ago, it was 300% higher. So you deal with these wild curves of cyclicality derived by the commodity price in the case of the grain, or in natural gas, because those are linked in the complex. And so for us, we develop a product which is weatherproof, it performs better, and we think over time actually has a better cost structure. Today we're at parity with synthetics, and we think that it's going much lower.
Right, but I think that's all awesome. But the takeaways here, you can produce, you're improving yield by 1,000%, right? Or something, maybe it's not 1,000, but
when you look at it on a sustainability perspective, yes. I mean, I think what you're referring to is we use 1/1000th the water. We don't have a, brutal natural gas reliance, which fertilizer does. Now, we have our own issues. Biologics have a lot of variability, and you have to manage those things in an environment. We have our own soil microbiome, different than the gut, but similar challenges that we're trying to communicate with the plant. But certainly there's no waste. These microbes, they live on the root system. They're fed by the plant. That's their energy source. And we use our genetic tools to teach them that their sole job in life is nitrogen fixation. That's a powerful thing. And so as we think about our role in the world, we definitely work with the synthetic fertilizer sources and players, seed companies. And if we're going to solve a challenge as big as fertilizer, we certainly all are going to have to work together to do that. And we're not dogmatic. It can be synthetic, it can be biological. We think over time more of it moves biological, and we play a key role in that. But if we're going to solve a 190 billion and growing industry problem, we got to do it together. And unfortunately, in our market, you're subject to commodity markets.
So Dror, I want to go to you because you kind of live in a desert. Right? And we're talking about growing stuff and with a lot less water and all the rest of it. One of the really interesting things, many of the interesting things that have come out of Israel have had to do with really advanced tech and really advanced AI and bio. And you're in charge of the organization that's nurturing that next crowd of people coming up with the crazy ideas that we're hearing about. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the areas that you're looking at, going forward in the future?
Yes, sure. First of all, I want to refer to something that you said in the beginning, that AI is going to accelerate biology. From our point of view, we should look at it as two different revolutions. Everyone is talking about artificial intelligence and the benefits it might bring and the risks it might bring. But I believe that biology and all the scientific reveals that you talked about at the beginning are going to create another revolution if you will, we can talk about the digital transformation that we all lived through in the last 2 decades. It's hard to make a profit, but it's probably a biological transformation that we are going to see. Now we are talking about...
Sorry, can I?
Yeah, sure.
Because I know that you talk about bioconvergence.
Right.
And can you maybe explain, because I think that is what you're describing, right?
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
From our point of view, bioconvergence is a term that we coined 3 years ago, is much more than just biology together with artificial intelligence. It's a biology with any other field of engineering, computer science, AI, nanotechnology, whatever. And I can give you some real-life examples of companies in Israel, startups in Israel that already converge those technologies together. For instance, a company that is developing nanorobots that go into your bloodstream and release the cure into your tumor just where it's needed. There is a company that is 3D printing human organs outside the human body to be implanted later. So this is not imaginary things. It's startups which are funded by investors and are developing their products. Another good example is not from the field of health tech, because bioconvergence is all across all human sectors, food and agri-tech and so forth. Just yesterday, Israel was the first country in the world to approve selling of cultured beef meat to consumers in Israel. Which is amazing, right?
And which company was this?
It was Aleph Farms.
Yep.
I will not get into the details of how you create a regulatory path for such a product. But,
wait, why don't you, because it's a long explanation or because it's like top secret?
It's not top secret, but it's very complicated, you know, for food administration.
I think this makes you the third, because Singapore has approved chicken, synthetically cultured chicken.
Right.
The United States, I think, has also recently.
Chicken and beef, this is the first one.
And this is the first.
Yes.
And beef is hard to culture.
Very hard to culture.
And
it's exactly a good example of bioconvergence. It's biology together with electronics, together with fermentation and so forth. So this is the area we talk about, and always when people ask me, how do you know if it's a company is bioconvergence or not bioconvergence, I say that when I come to visit the company and I see in the research and development department biologists sitting next to engineers or computer scientists, then I know it's a bioconvergence. Okay, so this is the area. But when we compare those two transformations, the digital and biological transformations, we need to understand that it's not the same. The challenges are huge when you talk about bioconvergence, starting from the science itself, through the commercialization process, funding, scaling, regulation, consumer adaptation. You know, we've all been educated not to consume ultra-processed food, right? And now we are going to produce ultra-processed food, and we need to make consumers, or build the confidence of consumers to use it. So there are huge amounts of challenges, and this is exactly why we as the innovation agency of the government decided that we need to step in and create the right environment for startups in Israel to innovate in this space, starting from applied research, the commercialization, building venture studios that incubate startups in the country, scaling up, building joint R&D labs, so the cost for them will be lower. So anything that is required in order to create the right environment in Israel for such innovation. And just to share with you, we just finished mapping all the startups that use bioconvergence in their products and services. We are about 100 startups today in Israel that are innovating, disrupting in different sectors of life using those technologies.
Yeah, that's terrific. All right, so we've got incredible, I didn't know about Aleph meat, that's awesome. So I'm gonna look at that later. So we've got incredible food, we've got microbiomes, we've got sense, we've got therapeutics, we didn't even talk about Moderna, we've got all of these things happening, new products for farming. What we have not yet talked about is what makes all of that possible. So I wanna talk to you, John, about that. I think maybe the average person does not know that Hewlett Packard Enterprise has been in this space in quite a while. You're doing more than making, like, you know, printers.
6 of the 10 world's fastest supercomputers are Hewlett Packard Enterprise, including the world's fastest computer that came out last year, an exascale computer. Most of the AI models are powered through our platform, and that's a combination of compute and underlying software that helps models train faster and more reliably. So, we have been very much engaged in this space for a long time. This area in particular, I think we're incredibly optimistic about. I think if you think about this technology across sort of three spectrums, efficiency, efficacy, and humanity, this hits all three. When you apply AI in these spaces, you generally come out with a better outcome than we would on our own. And that's incredibly exciting. And the things you all talked about, demonstrate that well. Efficiency, we're doing it all with fewer resources. So it's truly a fewer, better opportunity. And then lastly, it's the humanity side. Is it ultimately advancing the way people live and work, which is our corporate purpose? And everything about this space, for the most part, is about advancing the way people live and work. So there's a very strong connection to how you would want to use these technologies in this particular space. Right, there are certainly some risks and downsides, but overall the case is very positive.
I mean, you actually are in the life sciences space, and a lot of the infrastructure. I know everybody infrastructure is not the sexiest topic.
That's right.
Compared to everything else, but it's kind of.
Some of us think it's sexy, but that's
very sexy. John, you're sexy. Yes. But mission critical.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so again, I don't think the average person understands that.
That's right.
The consumer, that you're in the life sciences space, they might again wonder why that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I said, I mean, if you think about the importance of this technology, and then if you start to think about some of the things that we're facing at the moment, right? Number one is scarcity. The underlying technology right now, the chips themselves, some of you may have been at the Battle of the Chips session yesterday, et cetera, right? There's just a battle right now for chips because there are so much more demand than there is supply. That creates all kinds of downstream effects. It increases cost, because access to models and access to the technology raises costs. It also creates a scenario in which choices are being made about how this technology is being made available that may not necessarily line up with all the choices we would want. Are you going to fund a consumer technology because there's dollars there versus go solve some public health question that the economics of getting to that solution and that treatment are so far off that right now it doesn't warrant the investment? So I think there are some real significant issues at the moment in this issue around the scarcity of the resources. The second is we are consuming massive amounts of power to do the work that we're talking about. Data centers today are huge consumers of electrical power, and AI and the size of the machines we're talking about are only going to add to that problem. So while we're solving some of the world's greatest problems, we are also exacerbating maybe the most fundamental or one of the most fundamental problems. And I think we're all very, very much focused on that. Yeah. I'd say the third piece of this, which becomes interesting and a lot of discussion around this right now here at Davos, is the geopolitical situation. We live in a world of interconnected supply chains, and some of these phenomenal underlying technologies require minerals from one part of the world, other technologies from other parts of the world. As the situation destabilizes, people start talking about decoupling supply chains. People start talking about blockades of Taiwan, for example, as potential scenarios. What that could mean for the research community, for this community, the ability to access these technologies is considerable. Long term, we're incredibly optimistic and bullish. Near term, there are some real challenges that we have to overcome to make sure that with all the goodness that we see, that there aren't all of these knock-on downsides that could really put a chill in the air for a while.
So I just want to get everybody's opinion on this because I feel like I've been hearing these incredible research stories, these incredible, wonderful things that have happened for all this time. Agriculture hasn't changed in 14,000 years. I mean, not really, right?
Approximately.
Approximately. Just why is it taking so long to scale? What is happening? Like, how do we get this in the market faster, sooner? What do you all think is happening here in terms of scaling the tech, the business, the research?
I'll address your ag point. I mean, ag is certainly nuanced, right? I mean, to your point, we live in an integrated value chain. You can't do anything in ag without understanding its impact. It's probably the only industries where the industry itself isn't one integrated value chain. Now, to stick up for ag, it's very tech-enabled. I mean, 96% of farmers in the United States have a tractor that guides itself through GPS and you don't drive it.
But people aren't afraid of GPS.
No, I'm
They're
getting there.
real afraid of GMO,
I'm
right?
That's where I'm going.
Okay.
So you have some technology which is perceived as harmless, and it's used everywhere. GMO, I'm going to get kicked for saying this by half the crowd, they're not that bad. You can use them the wrong way, but we use a ton less chemistry because of GM. Now, there's ways it's been used the wrong way, and we need to fix that. But that, just like I was mentioning with synthetic fertilizers, promotes plant safety, plant health, yields, outcomes, driving crops in regions that you wouldn't be able to support a food system. Those are all good things. Biologics are tricky, though, because you take a biologic organism which has its own variability and are generally pretty fickle, and then you put it in a biological environment in soil with crazy weather that's getting crazier every single year, and now try to predict, to the earlier point, how these things are all going to work. And oh, by the way, you have uncontrollable commodity prices, and growers are buying retail and selling wholesale, so there's no margin to be shared, and it just gets very complicated very quickly. That's the exciting point, though, and that's why we're starting to see businesses that can scale are going to be enduring growth trends, because when the growers find technology that delivers on value, it delivers on cost, and it's a higher performing product than its incumbent, if it fits in that system, it's part of the system.
It's also the ability to predict. It's also the ability to predict.
Yeah.
If you think about the real power of AI, it is the ability to simulate and to predict in a way that we were not able to do before. Think about the situation in the COVID-19 vaccine in which you had to decide what you were going to do in providing guidance around people who could become pregnant or were pregnant and whether they should use the vaccine. You weren't going to go off and test on people who were pregnant.
Yeah, well,
but if you could if you can do the prediction,
we all have a lot of. So let's do this. Just because we're on vaccines, can I ask you to talk a little bit about Moderna and messenger RNA? I mean, and then Sarah, and then Dror. Is that okay?
I'm happy to talk about. Yes.
I mean, it's not like everybody think Moderna just like magically popped up because of COVID, but you already had that tech. Messenger RNA had been around forever. So. Yeah.
So Moderna is one of the companies that we founded 13 years ago. The technology at the time was ruled out as being completely impossible. And so the world just handed out a Nobel Prize. But at the time, in 2010, that work was essentially discounted because the degree to which it could actually reduce the innate immune response was minuscule compared to what we need to do. And the work that it took was engineering to actually get it to a place where we could truly shut down the innate immune response and make stuff. We had spent $5 billion building a platform of largely private, some public money, some corporate money, before COVID hit. We had 9 human vaccines that had been tested in humans. Every one of them showed neutralizing antibody levels sufficient to kill the vaccine, virus. COVID was the 10th. But since the world had no knowledge about any of this, because companies in biotech aren't sexy the way tech companies can be, and by the way, I'm going to answer your question in a couple of points.
They will be.
Well, I've been doing this for 36 years, and they've always been, will be. I think there's a fundamental mistake that's been made in the biotech industry, which is that the investment community, from day one, has overcomplicated the description of what we do.
Absolutely.
So as to freeze out generalist investors, and the consequence is paid by the next generation of companies, who then go to talk to investors who, by definition, think they don't understand what they're doing, and they don't want to understand what they're doing. They just avoid it altogether. So you have a small group of biotech specialists who want it that way. And let me expand the point further. I think the reason this is a challenging space is the reason every innovation breakthrough is challenging, which is this is basically an existential fight between incumbents and insurgents. And incumbents, just like in nature, like in any ecosystem, fix the ecosystem to favor them. Why wouldn't they? Monopolies are extreme incumbencies. But duopolies, like we do in seed business, or these types of large company-dominated spaces, are naturally, not with ill intent, created to keep out disruption. Now, you might say, why is this? That's pretty discouraging. Why would anybody in a startup do these things? The answer is, once in a while, and we're in a moment right now, and we were during the pandemic, there is so much uncertainty thrown at the field. In the case of vaccines, everybody was sitting at home figuring out when are we going to go back to work. And at that moment, the most extreme solutions come to the forefront because incumbents can't do anything. There was no incumbent solution to the vaccines. People tried to make some vaccines with old technology, and it fizzled out. So I would say that for a nitrogen microbe or some other things that we work on in the microbial area, another company we started is Indigo, which has made for many years microbes for different traits than nitrogen. These are the moments where you have to kind of just move in if there's uncertainty. So I think we think that in any given year, a startup has a fair chance of getting its capabilities out in a value chain that's largely fixed. You don't. Once in a while, when the large ones are at a loss for what to do, you have a chance, and you have to be ready to do that. That's what happened in Moderna's case. Moderna had 40 programs that was in the lab. 20 of them were in the clinic. Today, we have 50 in the clinic. But the pandemic gave us an opportunity to prove that we could go from 0 to 1 billion people. And then all of a sudden, everybody thinks it's an incumbent technology. That's the way I would look at it.
So to get all this stuff to market, to get to the future, what I'm hearing you say is we need a pandemic, and we need you to have competition with other investors.
You need uncertainty.
Okay.
You need uncertainty. I think, just to make my point, humans run away from uncertainty. We are afraid of the unknown, and therefore we run away from uncertainty.
And you ask what if all the time.
I would say that a subset of folks run towards uncertainty, because uncertainty is a protected space, because nobody in their right mind would go to it. If you can create value in uncertainty, things that people believe cannot work, you have a unique position. Mm-hmm. If you can persist long enough so that the solution is now necessary for a market disruption, you win. And I think that, AI, how many of these, why aren't the big companies saying we created AI, and an outfit like OpenAI is saying if you just add enough content, all of a sudden something exponential happens? I think that it's a moment in time where that opportunity hits. And as startups, I don't think it's a fair system, and I worry it's never going to be from an evolutionary standpoint. So you just have to be there when that moment comes. That's my sense.
Sarah?
Yeah, no, it was just really, really insightful comments. And I think this idea of the urgency, and I also think we have to remember, honestly, if every idea we try succeeds, we're not really doing research, we're doing application. And so we have to truly have a funnel of ideas that some are going to fail. But if we maybe take a step back of why is AI important in biology? I like to think about, well, what is biology? Biology is life. Biology is the study of life. And I think your earlier comment in your first comments about we sometimes think we know more than we do. And I reflect back of a few years ago when Craig Venter and colleagues identified what are the minimum number of genes. So what is the minimum code to make life? They used a small bacteria. What was amazing about that is when they identified the minimal pieces of a puzzle to make life, 30% of those pieces were of unknown function. And the reason I'm bringing this up is this is why AI and what HP and others are doing is incredibly important, because if we're, as scientists, trying to just use what we know and what is known, we're not going to figure that out. And so AI is going to help us accelerate that and come up with solutions to that 30% and putting those pieces together to be able to so much more quickly solve the incredibly urgent problems we have today. Because I would say, how do we make some of these other huge urgent problems, such as sustainability, such as hunger and malnutrition, be the burning platforms that COVID was?
So Sarah, I just want to double click on this before we go over to Dror. So the minimum viable genome, super cool project, and super impressive and super exciting. And the reason for that project was to try to understand what actually inside, what's necessary, understand life in a more fundamental way. But that was not the headline. The headline for that story, I recall, was first life ever created whose parents were both computers. So that brings me to trust, because you're very right. Anytime you say, people don't realize how much has been genetically modified at this point. And I recall Dolly the sheep, right? We all remembered Dolly. I remember the Pope came out and had to reassure people that it was going to be okay. President Clinton, who's not a scientist, had to give a special, announcement, press conference. All these years later, we don't have demonic sheep roaming around Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, I don't think, right?
No.
No, we've got new medicines, new clothing, things like that. So we do have a perception problem in your space. And I would be very curious. The story of cultured beef is an amazing story. I wonder how many people are going to stand outside protesting once that stuff goes on sale. Right. So I'd love to maybe start there, but I'd love for all of you to weigh in. Look, we all understand the risks. There are knock-on effects. biology sometimes evolves in ways that we cannot predict, even with HP supercomputers. We can't necessarily predict every permutation in advance. So I think people are aware of that. But I want us to talk a little bit about perception and trust, because I think that's really important.
Yes. Before that, with your permission, I would like to refer to the question why it's not happening faster, because we share this frustration, right? And, AI, for instance, humanity speaks about AI for 50 years. And if we were meeting here even a year ago, it was not such a big thing, right? Only when generative AI broke into our life, now everyone speaks about AI. So as Noubar said, there are moments in the evolution of humanity where things happen. So from the fact it didn't happen up till now, we should not think it will not happen in the future. Now, the second reason it's not happening faster goes back to what I said before about the different business models. Developing an app and putting it on the internet, or developing an enterprise software and selling it to a large corporation is not the same as innovating in deep technology. I think Noubar alluded to that when he said that many investors are avoiding investing in biotech. And this is wrong. They should go there and they should invest, because those are the new frontiers of innovation. Now, going to the question about consumer willingness to consume this type of products, I think this is one of the major obstacles. Again, we were educated, we were all growing up and being educated that eating processed food is not good for us. And now we have to re-educate consumers that beef meat that is created in the lab is actually healthier for them and healthier for the planet, by the way.
Well, why? So yes, why is that? Can you explain why?
Yes, it's a lab. It's like when you produce, a pharmaceutical pill, right? It's very regulated. The process. It's very clean. It's very. It's the best technology to manufacture anything. So if you manufacture meat in the same way, basically you get a much healthier product with less antibiotics and many things that we give our cows today in the farms. So eventually it's going to be healthier. It's going to be even less costly than raising a cow in a farm. And for sure, it's going to be healthier for our planet. So, and we will have to go through these cycles of adoption of consumers. By the way, this is why it was so important for us to work with the Food Administration in Israel and to get this approval. After all, Israel is a tiny market. It's 9 million people. So what's the point in selling beef, cultured beef meat in Israel? The point was that we wanted the Israeli companies to address, so to engage with consumers as early on as possible, to get consumer feedbacks, to understand the concerns, to understand the flavors, to understand everything that eventually will impact the demand from consumer. And then they can mature the products and go to the global markets.
So we've got 2 minutes left. We could talk all day long about potential risks. And I think trust is a risk. I'd like to end, though, on what is it that every person making a decision should be thinking about. You can just each very shortly, very quickly, maybe start here. Just when we think about this space, what's one key important thing you want everybody to really think about?
On how to accelerate things?
Or just like it's here, right? This is not like a future thing. So what do we do? What are we supposed to take away?
Innovators to innovate, researchers to research, governments to put the money to de-risk the business as much as possible, investors to go there and take risks. In Hebrew, venture funds in Hebrew are called risk funds. And there is a joke that risk funds do not like risk. They prefer to invest in something that they already know. So take the risk and go for it.
John.
I'd say keeping humanity at the middle of this. The tendency when we think about AI is to think about it's the robots taking over the world. We really ought to be thinking about most of this as augmentation of human intelligence, and that's encouraging. And then keeping humanity at the center of it. Are you advancing the way people live and work in what you're doing? I think if we do those two things, we can build people's trust, and we can actually make sure this is headed in the right direction.
That's a great point. Chris?
I would say it's work together. These solutions are ready to roll. I mean, they're scaling, and with the right government frameworks and risk appetite, they can work together, but doing it on an island is not an effective way to bring something to market quickly and at scale. So seek partners, help avoid some of that incumbency risk in terms of adoption, and work together.
Sarah?
Yeah, for me, I think it's important for consumers. What are we doing? And for them to understand that biology is going to bring them the same and better products in a way that is sustainable for the world. And so they should be excited about the opportunity.
It's a tricky thing to go last. Look, I think that the next few years with AI in biology may give us more ability to demonstrate how things are working in ways that we have struggled to do so far. And whether we can be predictive or not, we can at least be much more comprehensively descriptive and therefore think about programming. So for example, mRNA is just the beginning of programmable medicines. If we can come up with programmable medicines instead of one-off shots in the dark that people found by scourging labs or soil just to find a new chemical, as we used to do years ago, I think that should add to the reason navigation systems are kind of viewed to be reliable is because you're some human engineered it and then actually gave it to you to do a job. In biology, there's a bit of a mystery of where all this stuff comes from. The more I think programmable organisms, et cetera, can do this, perhaps we'll have a better language. Plus, and this is kind of a new thought, maybe we can use AI, large language models, to better describe what it is we're doing so that humans can understand it, instead of leaving it to scientists to use the way they think to describe it, which is a dead on arrival.
So I think it's a wonderful point, a great place to start. I want to thank all of you for this incredible panel and everybody who's here today. There is another AI panel later on, AI and biology panel later on today, if this is interesting to you. So thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.